Congress is out of town this week, but when they come back on Monday, lawmakers will face a government funding deadline.
Yes, they have 2 days to act fast, and if they don't, there will be a government shutdown. Joining us now is Issac, Hale, a political professor at Occidental College. Thank you so much for being with us. First, we want to talk about what needs to happen to avert this government shutdown, but there's also headlines this morning from the Trump administration saying, hey, you shut down the government, we're going to eliminate a bunch of government jobs.
Right.
So what are we really looking at here?
Well, we're looking at a Tuesday deadline for Congress to pass a funding bill to keep the government open. We've seen these shutdown battles many times before.
Many times. We talk about it, I
So
feel like,
often.
all the time.
So many times. We saw it under Obama, we saw it under Biden, we saw it under Trump. This is not our first rodeo. And Republicans have a governing trifecta. Not only do they control the White House, they control the House and the Senate. So ultimately, they have the votes to pass this if they want to. The holdup, as it has been before, is the filibuster. There is a 60-vote threshold for passing bills in the United States Senate. That is self-imposed. Republicans in that chamber could change the rules to pass this with a simple 50-vote threshold, and they've changed the rules before. They did this to change the confirmation process for Trump appointees just last month.
Oh,
they
that's
could
right.
do this.
Yeah, they could.
Interesting. Okay,
Do you think they will?
Right.
Well, this is the question. They would prefer to keep the filibuster around. The filibuster is a useful tool for the minority when they are there. And Republicans, at some point, again, will be in the Senate minority. They'd like to have the filibuster around. But for Democrats, if they don't use it, I think the question becomes, is it just a tool that only gets used by the Republican Party, right? Or is this a tool, they're afraid of losing it, but if they don't use it, what is the point of having it for the party?
Sure. And if those rules don't change now, Democrats are saying you need some votes for us, so why don't we get what we want, which seems to be health care, the main sticking point right now.
And health care is something where Democrats have a decided advantage in polling. Polling shows that voters largely oppose the cuts to Medicaid and the reduction of Obamacare subsidies that happened in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And so this is friendly terrain for the Democratic Party. But you've also seen messaging from the Trump administration that they're willing to let this go to a shutdown or just pass this on a party line vote changing the rules rather than give concessions to Democrats.
I know, but it's so fascinating to me because I feel like before the Trump administration, I'm talking about his first administration, you never had a president who would say, let's go ahead and shut down the government because of the optics of it and what it can mean for federal employees. The first Trump administration, he did come forward and say, yeah, go ahead and shut down the government. Now they're saying again, go ahead and shut down the government. What is playing out here? Why are we seeing this now and have the optics changed?
Well, I think one of the things that's important to keep in mind is that the Republican Party has just gotten substantially more conservative over the last 20 years. And I think this is something new, but it is reflected in documents like Project 2025, like the goals of the Heritage Foundation and other conservative think tank organizations, where fundamentally they would like to shrink the size of the government. And even without shutdowns, we've seen reductions in staffing at agencies like the Department of Education or USAID. And this is reflective of the larger ideological goal of the Trump administration of reducing the size of the federal government. And so a shutdown that would reduce the size of the federal government, at least temporarily, isn't something that they're ideologically afraid of. It accomplishes their goals in some ways.
Interesting. Okay, are you feeling positive at all about negotiations? Of course, President Trump canceled a meeting with top Democrats, won't even talk to them. So do you fear they're not even going to try to negotiate as we get closer to the shutdown?
I think probably we will. My guess, I don't have a crystal ball here, but my guess is that we will probably get right up to the deadline without serious negotiations happening. Democratic Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries has said that a handshake deal is off the table, some kind of informal arrangement. They don't have the votes in the House anyways to stop a bill, but in the Senate, it does not appear like deal making is really happening, and so we may end up in a period of a few days to a few weeks of shutdown, as we've seen in some of these battles in the past.
I do wonder, though, it kind of goes back to me of what we were talking about earlier, of like we keep hearing and having to talk about these government shutdowns. In some ways, if it finally does happen, where there's a government shutdown, can that then lead to fundamental change later?
It hasn't in the past. I'll say there.
Right.
Okay. Well.
Okay. Issac, thank you for being with us. We'll watch and see what happens.
Yes.
The deadline is approaching.
Thank you.